Can you imagine with me for a moment the story of Noah's Ark? It's one that we're all familiar with. It's one that we grew up hearing and listening to being told. You know, when we think about that story, we often romanticize it. In fact, I find it quite comical that it is a story that we often use for children's illustrations, and we often paint on the walls of our children's nurseries and children's areas. We often have pictures in our mind of a boat that is riding on blue seas with a rainbow behind it and animals and people living in this beautiful, perfect harmony as they sail off into the sunset. But you know, when you think about the story and you look at the text, that's really not the picture of Noah's Ark. In fact, it was probably quite a frightening story. If you think about the text, it's a text that's really action-packed, a really end-of-the-world scenario in which everyone and everything that is outside of the ark perishes. And within the story, I think it contains one of the saddest verses in all the Bible. In Genesis chapter 6 and verse 6, it says that God regretted that he had made mankind, and it grieved his heart. It's almost one of those moments, if you can think back as a child, when your parents sit down with you and they say to you, you know what, I'm not mad at you, but I'm just disappointed. Oh, how you wish that they would just be mad, because you would rather them be angry with you than them being disappointed in you. But in the story of Noah's Ark, we find that the sin of humanity got to the point that it broke God's heart. And sin still breaks God's heart today. And I want you to pick up with me in the story. It's right after Noah had finished the ark. God had brought all the animals to join Noah in the ark. And the story goes on in Genesis chapter 7, beginning in verse 11. It says, "And the 600th year of Noah's life, and the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven were open, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On that very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife and 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creepy thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh in which there was breath of life, and those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him." And then the key part I want you to hear, "And the Lord shut him in." And the Lord shut him in. After everyone had entered, after all of Noah's family, after all of the animals, the Lord shut them in. Think about the door with me that existed on the ark. Think about its vastness. I mean, the word I would use to describe it would be huge. Not only was it tall and wide, but it had to have been thick, heavy enough that it could support the weight of a pair of elephants who had walked right into the ark earlier in this moment. That door was a critical part of the ark. It was needed for everyone to come in, but it was also the point of the ark at which it was the most vulnerable. If the ship was going to leak anywhere, if water was going to rush in and flood the ark, it would have been at the point of that door. That door was a critical component that if it failed, the entire ship would sink. I find it of great significance that the Lord took it upon himself to close the door. The building of the ark was left up to Noah and his family, the boarding of the family and all the animals, but the one who took responsibility for closing the door was the Lord. A task that could be trusted to no one else. For if the door was late in being closed, or if the door was slow in being closed, or if the door was not closed tight enough, it would seek doom for those on the ark and for the remainder of humanity. And so the Lord saw it fit that he would take on the most important part of closing the door. There are some things in life that should only be trusted to the Lord. There are some tasks so critical that they shouldn't be trusted by another human being, or they shouldn't even be entrusted by the church. There are tasks that the Lord sees fit that He and only Him can be responsible for. When I think about such tasks, I'm reminded of the task of our own salvation. I want to show you a text in John chapter 10, particularly in verse 9, in which Jesus describes Himself in a particular way that's relevant to the story of Noah's Ark. He says this about Himself in John chapter 10, verse 9. He says, "I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture." Think about that image with me of Jesus being the door. Jesus is the door by which we must enter to be saved, and all who enter by Jesus find safe harbor and they find safe passage. When it comes to our salvation, there is only one door by which we can guarantee our salvation. There is only one place by which God has secured and God has ensured that we will be saved, and it is through Jesus. You know, in our world today, when there is many things in doubt, and when there are many things in question, when our economy is in question, when our health is in question, when our very function of life is being shaken and in question, there is one thing that remains not shaken, and that is the security of our salvation. Just as the Lord saw it fit to secure the safety of Noah and his family and to secure the safety of the world by closing the door on the ark that day, the Lord has also seen it fit to close and secure the door of our salvation through Jesus Christ. Never has there been a soul that has perished that has been trusting in Jesus for their salvation, and never will there be a soul that perishes that is trusting in Jesus for their salvation. The greatest hope and the greatest peace that I can offer you today as we begin this week to celebrate Easter is that our salvation is secured. God has not entrusted our salvation in ourselves and in our works. God has not entrusted our salvation in the church. But He has only entrusted our salvation in His Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ. And all who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. And so let me encourage you as we go throughout this week, as we move towards celebrating Resurrection Sunday and celebrating Easter, let us begin by going forth in great joy, knowing that our salvation is secured, that the Lord has shut us in, and nothing can take that away from us. God bless. Go forth in joy, knowing that you are saved by faith in Jesus Christ.